Population collapse is one of the biggest threats to the future of human civilization, and that is what is going on right now. I'm trying to set a good example because the birth rate on Earth is so low that we're facing civilizational collapse unless the birth rate returns to a sustainable level.
I've thought for at least 10 years that the biggest problem in 50 years will be that there's just not enough people.
We might be living on Earth right now at a time with the most number of humans that are ever going to exist at one time ever.
Yeah, that's highly probable. And and the population collapse in developed countries is precipitous, right? It's like we fall off a cliff. I worked on a UN committee, it's got to be 10 years ago now, to help draft the UN Secretary General's report on sustainable economic development. And so I looked at all sorts of things like that. I was very curious, for example, because people have been beating the overpopulation drum since, it really kicked in the 1960s, because there were dire predictions. By the year 2000, the Club of Rome came out and said, there'll be riots and mass starvation and mass movement of migrants and all the things you hear about climate change because there's too many people on the planet. And that just didn't happen at all. It wasn't just wrong, it was anti-true. It was absolutely wrong. And so I looked at population trends and first of all found, not that this is an act of genius or anything, that as soon as you educate women, the size of family shrinks precipitously, like below replacement. And that's partly because women have other options. All the countries in the West are way below replacement. Korea's way below replacement. South Korea, Japan, way below replacement. I think Nigeria will have more people in it than China by the end of the century. It'll be young people we don't have enough of, and of course young people are the ones who do the innovation and are going to do most of the heavy lifting, etc. And so there's going to be a terrible shortage of young people.
Well, you see this with some of the things that I posted, that ONS data, the 50.1% of women childless by 30, and both men and women are replying to that tweet saying, well, good, there's too many people on the planet.
This idea that the planet has too many people on it, there's no sentiment more implicitly genocidal than that statement. So what do you mean too many people? Exactly. And what do you mean the planet? And what do you propose to do about that exactly? Mass abortion, is that your answer? Or should we do something a little more dramatic? Maybe we'll just shame people out of having children. And I've seen people do that, literally. I saw a professor when I was was a number of professors talking to a couple hundred students. And one of the professors who was an environmentalist activist type, and he got up on stage and shook his finger to the whole young crowd saying that him and his wife had only decided to have one child, which was, in my opinion, one child too many for him. Mm-hmm. And told all the young people there if they had a shred of ethical decency that they would severely limit their reproductive potential. And I stood up and said that I thought that was one of the most appalling things I'd ever heard anyone in academia say to young people, which is really saying something because they say plenty of appalling things. And it was a very uncomfortable moment, and he huffed off the stage. But in a frenzy, talking about how you couldn't talk about such things without being pilloried on ethical grounds. And yeah, that's for sure. It was just beyond comprehension. It's beyond comprehension, but it's associated with, because what's the implications for a doctrine like that? What do you do with the cancer?
Put it out.
Yeah, that's for sure. Poison it or whatever. There's nothing you don't do to a cancer. So you're going to use a metaphor like that? There's too many people on the planet. You're going to use a metaphor like that? And then you're going to also decide that you're virtuous while you're using it because you're on the side of the planet, whatever the hell that means. So yeah, it's unbelievable. And a huge part of it's rooted in this existential shame and horror at the condition of being human and the fact that life is rife with suffering and a lot of it's unjustified. And, it's a Mephistophelian position. So Mephistopheles was laid out, portrayed in Goethe's Faust. Goethe stands in relationship to German literature in the same manner that Shakespeare stands in relationship to English literature. And Goethe's Mephistopheles says straight out twice in the play, once in the first, there's two books, and once in the first book and once in the second. Goethe has him restate it twice. Existence is such a foul thing because of all its suffering, essentially, that it would be better if it was merely annihilated. And that's the Mephistophelian stance. This whole show should just come to a halt. Look at how corrupt people are. Evil reigns everywhere. It's nothing but will to power. We're destroying the planet with our unchecked ambition, all of it rooted in greed and Machiavellianism and jockeying for position. And we're so contemptible that we should just roll up and die. And we should shame women into not having children. And we should shame men so they never manifest any planet-destroying ambition. And it's unbelievably appalling. It goes all the way down to the bottom of things. That's what's tearing our culture apart, this dispute about the nature of existence at the most fundamental level. And we have to be smart about our resources, but that doesn't mean there's zero sum. And certainly doesn't mean the world is a zero-sum game. And that's a Malthusian idea, that population will grow till it consumes all available resources and precipitously collapse. And then why do we think apocalyptically? It's, because things do come to sudden ends. People die, people get fatal illnesses, like the world you so carefully constructed can be blown apart at any moment by a random occurrence, genetic mutation that causes the cancer that kills you. Life has a fundamentally apocalyptic aspect. And we do understand that because we're self-conscious, and then it's very difficult not to apply that kind of apocalyptic reasoning to things as such. The world's going to burn up. The climate's too hot. What about runaway positive feedback loops? Because that's what the climate types are afraid of. It's like, hey, they happen. How do we bind our apocalyptic thinking?
I'm feeling, I guess, relatively optimistic about the future these days. There are certainly some big risks that humanity faces. I think the population collapse is a really big deal that I wish more people would think about. Because the birth rate is far below what's needed to sustain civilization at its current level. It's important to take whatever actions we can think of to address the existential risks that affect the future of consciousness.
There's a whole generation coming through who seem really sad about the future. What would you say to them?
Well, I think if you want the future to be good, you must make it so. Take action to make it good, and it will be.